Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today we've got a fun one. DraftKings released their Game of the Year spreads on their app this morning. So we get a bunch of spreads, not just in week 1 and week 2, but all of the biggest games really of the year. We now have an early look into how the books are thinking. So there's about, there are like 15 or 20 lines in the SEC games that are going to be the biggest ones this year that we have. So I figured let's just go through them today. Let's look at where the books are at and really begin to preview some of these big time matchups a little more in depth this fall. So the first one, this is all going chronologically. Missouri goes to Kansas in week 2, and the Tigers are obviously the more talented team. They're the better roster, and they're favored by 7 when they go to the Jayhawks. Now, that's a decently large number. I would have maybe guessed a little bit lower, not because I think that Missouri's, going to lose that game, but you're on the road. You're in week 2 in a rivalry spot, and with it being early, we have no idea if Ahmad Hardy's running the ball. Now, what my gut feeling is telling me is that that line is baked in without Ahmad Hardy, because that's how, the books can kind of cover themselves a little bit more. So that, when I think it through that way, I get way more confident in Missouri, right? Because even though the number is bigger than I thought it would, you do get it at that key number of 7, probably enticing some Kansas money. And I think and people are going to be like, oh, Hardy's not playing, and then take Kansas. I think that this line, Missouri minus 7, is probably baked in without Ahmad Hardy. So if anything, it would just go up to 8.5 or 9. So with Missouri being favored by 7 there, that seems like a spot where I'm really confident in the Tigers, and so are the books. But just moving on, another big week 2 game. When Oklahoma goes to Michigan, this one, Oklahoma is obviously an underdog here, but they're only plus 2.5. They didn't cross the bridge to get to a field goal. And I'm going to do this about every time I mention the spread in this video and in this fall, but with Oklahoma only plus 2.5, what the books want you to do there is then take Michigan. Because you're getting Kyle Whittingham in his first big home game, and you need to win by less than a field goal. That's it. It's easy. It's easy. It's so easy. You only win by 3, that's great. You get a lot of money on Michigan. You get a lot of money on the Big House. The Big Ten is better than the SEC, all that. Oklahoma only catching 2.5, being dogs by less than a field goal, is, again, incredibly confidence-inspiring to me that the Sooners are able to go beat Michigan for the second straight year. Now, obviously, what that game hinges on a lot is really just Bryce Underwood's development, and I do believe that Bryce is going to be way better than he was last year. I think he'll be more consistent, more explosive through the air. We know how good his legs are, but Oklahoma's defense is really damn good, too. And they already got to look at him last year. I think material will be healthier. He has another batch of really good weapons this year, so Oklahoma plus 2.5, I liked it as a confidence-inspiring spread for the Sooners. Obviously, once we get there, it'll be a lot easier to make a pick on the game. But then through the biggest game in week 2, Texas versus Ohio State. This one's in Austin, and it's a pick 'em right now. There is no lean either way on this. Now, what that tells me is that Ohio State will be favored on a neutral field, obviously, because in Austin, Texas is a pick 'em in a prime time game. So Ohio State is better than the Longhorns on a neutral field. But that's not where the game's being played. I thought this game might pop out with Texas laying 2.5, but it's not. It's way tighter. And with that, with that in mind, I do think they kind of want you to take Texas, right? Because they're at home. It's a revenge spot to get the Buckeyes for last year. So I do believe that line is kind of asking you to bet on Texas because the books like the Buckeyes in that spot. Now, if you've seen my stuff, you know that I like Texas going all the way this year. So my pick is going to be Texas in this game, hard stop. But what that line does tell me is that maybe there's a little more confidence on the Buckeyes among the people who know everything, which are really those odds makers. So that was a very instant line popping out. And then moving on to week 3, Florida, when they go to Auburn, that game's also a pick 'em. So obviously Florida, same deal. They're on the road here to pick them. They will be favored on a neutral field. I do like the Gators in this spot, and this is a pretty big game because Summerall and Golish, they were hired at the same time. So whether or not it's fair, they're going to be measured against each other as the years go on in terms of success and how good the hires were. And this game is obviously massive for A, that debate, but also just B, you have two schools who are trying to get bounce back seasons. This is your conference opener. It's a launching point for the rest of the year. So this is a big time game, and a pick 'em really tells us that we're going to get a really good matchup there on the Plains. Then probably the game of the year in the SEC when Ole Miss hosts LSU. You got the Rebels laying 1.5. I love Ole Miss in this game. I really do. And that line is telling you to bet Ole Miss. So that scares me a little bit because if the books want money coming in on Ole Miss, they like LSU to make them money. Now, my read on why I like Ole Miss so much in this spot is just because you get Lane Kiffin at home, obviously. You have that whole revenge factor. You have all that energy. You have all your weapons back. And LSU's offense, I'm a little worried about, at least early on in the year, because of Sam Levitt missed spring camp. And there's all that transfers, all those transfers, all that new. So I'm worried about LSU's offense there, but the books don't seem to be. So as we get closer, we'll obviously get a better feel for that game. The line will obviously move, but as the line opens, it's clear that they want you to take Ole Miss to just have to win by 2 at home in that massive revenge spot. So we'll see how that line moves. Going a bit out of order here, let's just go through all these Texas games because the Longhorns are favored in every other game here that's on this list that wasn't the Ohio State game, and they're pretty big numbers. So when they go to Tennessee, Texas is favored by 7. When they play Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout, they're favored by 6. When they host Ole Miss, the Longhorns are laying 9.5 points, almost a double-digit spread against what is a very good Ole Miss team. When they go to LSU, Texas favored by 3, and when they go to Texas A&M to end the year, they're laying 2.5. The books had the Longhorns favored in every single one of these big games in conference, and a lot of them are on the road. So that tells you that, obviously I'm not saying that I discovered this Texas roster, but my confidence in the Longhorns is clearly echoed with the books. That this roster is just stupid talented, that you probably get a very good jump from Arch Manning this year, that Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo are going to be amazing together, and that defense, led by Will Muschamp with all that talent like Colin Simmons, Rasheem Biles, Ty Anthony Smith, it's going to be unstoppable. Or unmovable, I should say, for the defense. So the Longhorns being favored, not only in all those games, but like by touchdowns and by almost double digits. That really tells you a lot about where the books are at with this Texas team and how dominant they can be this fall. But looking at some of the Georgia games here, right? Georgia they go to Tuscaloosa in the middle-ish of the year. They're favored by a field goal right now. On the road, Georgia is laying 3 to the Crimson Tide. That number was surprising to me. I thought you might get Bama laying like a point or 2. It just where the line is tight enough to where it would tell you that a neutral field, Georgia is favored because that's how I would expect that to happen. But so this is telling you that Georgia on a neutral field would be like 5.5, 6-point favorites. And if this game was in Athens, we'd see a line like 8 or maybe even 9. So the books are telling you that Georgia is the way better team. And with, having to get to 3 on the road, they kind of want you, they think that this will entice you to bet Alabama. Because you can catch Bama just, at home, just keep it close, keep it within a field goal, we're good. Books think Georgia's going to go to Tuscaloosa and take care of business. So I'm very interested to see how that game looks as we get closer. They also are favored by 5.5 when they go to Ole Miss. So these Georgia lines are pretty big, right? That game is in Oxford. And looking at Ole Miss's schedule before and after that Georgia game, it will be Ole Miss's 5th consecutive game. And for Georgia, that will only be their 2nd game after a bye and playing Florida. So the bye week advantage definitely does go to Georgia there. And Ole Miss still have come off of at Texas, at home versus Auburn, and then they get Georgia. That game's a really big spot for both teams, obviously. And seeing Georgia open up laying that many points, it's really interesting. It's a lot of points, and the books have a ton of confidence in what Georgia can do this fall. Looking at some other Tennessee spreads, we talked about how they were 7-point dogs when they host Texas. That could be a massive game for the Vols in their future. But when they host Alabama, Tennessee is catching a 1.5. They're home dogs right now to the Crimson Tide. I love Tennessee in that game, just from a preseason perspective, and that line being really, really tight. On a neutral field, you get Bama maybe 3 or 4-point favorites, but that's not where this game is being played. This game is being played in Neyland, where Tennessee has had a lot of success against Alabama in the past. The line's incredibly interesting. I think that gives me more confidence, too, in Tennessee in that spot, right? Because if you want to bet Bama, you're like, it's got to win by 2 points. They could be losing if field goal covers me. Give me the Tide. I like that spot. I like short home dogs pretty much all the time, and Tennessee is definitely no exception to me there. And when Tennessee hosts LSU, it's the exact same line. LSU favored by 1.5, hitting the road to Knoxville. Now, the context around this game for this is the second to last week of the year, and both teams have their bye in week 9. So there's really no bye week advantage. But looking at the 2 games before this, LSU plays Bama and Texas, and then they go to Tennessee. Tennessee plays Kentucky, and they go to A&M. So obviously, A&M's going to beat you up, but LSU plays the much more grueling pair of games between Bama and Texas versus Tennessee, where they get Kentucky at home and A&M. So LSU will be much more physically and mentally tested coming up to in those 2 games leading up to this one than Tennessee will. I think I like Tennessee as a preseason pick here in this game, and I think that the line and the context around it helps me out with that. And the final game of the year, when Tennessee goes to Vanderbilt, they're laying 3 to the Commodores. I like the Commodores in this spot preseason, and the line makes sense to me, right? Because Tennessee is definitely the more talented team than the Commodores. You're good. You get a revenge spot to try and catch Vanderbilt in their home field after they beat you in yours last season, but it's a really tight line. It's a really tight line. I believe that the public perception around Vanderbilt, which is, I think, accurate to a degree, is that without Diego Pavia, without a guy like Eli Stowers, they're really going to kind of regress. Not go back to Vanderbilt of old, but with Jared Curtis in his first year, how good can he really be in his debut season? You're kind of predicting a bit of a regression for Vanderbilt. I think you could see that happen, but then you get this line. Oh, Tennessee only has to beat Vandy by a field goal. They're going to be way worse. They're back to the Vandy of old. Sure, take the Vols by a field goal on the road in a rivalry spot. I think the Commodores are going to still be a very solid football team, and by week 13, Jared Curtis won't be a true freshman anymore. He will have tons of starting experience both at home and on the road in big games. I love that line for Vanderbilt at home, catching 3 against the Vols. And finally, let's touch on some Texas A&M big game spreads. When they go to LSU, the Tigers are favored by 3. Now, they went to Baton Rouge last year as well, but because of the 9-game schedule, they kind of had restarted the clock, so you don't really have that cushion of, I went there last year, I don't need to go there this year. They're going back to Baton Rouge this year, and the Tigers favored by 3. I do have LSU getting revenge on A&M for what they did to them at home last season. Now, when I was picking this game in the preseason, like 2 weeks ago, I struggled with that because, sure, it's a revenge game for LSU. Nobody on LSU was really there, right? I mean, the coaches, a lot of them are different. The players, tons of them are different. So you do still have some players and coaches who were there last year when A&M fired Brian Kelly in this game last season. But for the most part, the players who are there don't really care about this game, at least to that degree of, we need to get these guys back. Now, the fans do. And, Blake Baker will be there. He'll get the guys going. Some of the running backs will get those guys going. So there is enough retention where that feeling will be there. But it's not like a classic revenge spot. But regardless, I just think that LSU, in this game, in this situation, they're coming off of that, what I believe is going to be a road loss at Ole Miss. Now you come home, a big bounce back opportunity. I think they catch A&M in this spot. So I like that line being -3 against A&M. And then A&M also has to go to Alabama. Bama's only favored by 2.5 in this game. Another a weird line for Alabama that I would have guessed was actually bigger, but A&M only catching 2.5 when they go to Tuscaloosa. That makes people want to bet Alabama. So all of a sudden you're looking at A&M here in the spot saying you could really go get a win in Tuscaloosa. That'd be a massive road win over the Crimson Tide for the Aggies. And then I brought it up already, but they're catching 2.5 when they host Texas in the final week of the regular season. I do think A&M is going to be a good team. Their schedule is tough, and at the end of the year, I think the Longhorns are just too good. So with that line being tight, it is enticing you to bet Texas and just kind of leave A&M to the side, even though they're at home, which is promising for Aggie fans. But I just think that the line's kind of irrelevant to me. If the game's played on the field in this game specifically, I'm not sure A&M has the horses to keep up with Texas. So those are just some of the big game lines that I found really interesting immediately from this morning. There obviously are a ton others that are out if you want to go look at them or even bet them. Do it responsibly because this far out, we could still have injuries in fall camp. And if you're betting games that are later in the season, there are so many variables week to week that could ruin those lines. So be incredibly careful betting on games this far out, but go look at it for fun. Right, I mean, we're just looking at it for fun here. It's fun to talk about, fun to project where they could be at. That's why we do this. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. If you have been enjoying my college football preview content and you want more SEC daily doses of football previews every single day until we kick off in August, subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. I'm doing this every single day. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.